G'day mate and welcome to Shipbuilding Basics with me, JD. Today I want to cover Asteroid Collectors. I want to cover how do they work, does quality really matter, options for how to store asteroids, along with some more advanced setups like automatically and dynamically changing their filters or using their own internal storage buffer. But before I fill your head with a whole lot of information, can I ask, can I just borrow a like? I just like to borrow a like. I like to borrow a like early in the video. If you're not happy with the video, you didn't learn anything along the way, then by all means you can have your like back. Let's start with your very first simple setup. It might look something like this, where you have an asteroid collector just outputting onto a belt, having a small belt buffer before feeding into your asteroid crushers, which are then processing those resources and taking them off elsewhere. Or you might have gone for a direct insertion. As you can see, this one's meant to be doing iron. Unfortunately, the asteroid collector is grabbing everything but iron. We can actually set some filters on there, so we can filter them to just iron, at which point he will only grab iron. So if I dump iron in front of him, he will grab that. If I dump other things, he will ignore it. Whereas his friend that's just dumping onto the belt is going to grab a little bit of everything. Now, with this setup, this is perfectly fine. This will get you started, but it's probably not going to scale terribly well, and it's probably not going to suit you for a little bit more of an industrial setup. Don't forget, you can always throw the excess resources over the edge. Even if you have a guy that you have forgot to filter, you can just throw an inserter right beside him and throw things into a gap in the platform. It has to have a gap in the platform. This is why I have this little one tile square here, right beside the asteroid collector, so we can just throw things overboard if we don't need them. All right, so let's talk about, well, asteroid collector stats, because again, with space age came quality, at which point we have a couple of stats that we should probably be aware of when looking at an asteroid collector. Originally, on a standard, normal asteroid collector, we have a collection area of 15 by 15. If we hover over one, we can see exactly what the collection area is. On top of that, we have the collection arm max speed. The max speed doesn't matter too much unless you're building some really weird designs. We've tucked the asteroid collectors inside of the hull, at which point you might want the arm to travel a little bit faster. We do have a collection arm count. The collection arm count is actually very, very important. More arms collect more things more faster, obviously. On top of that, he does have an internal buffer and internal storage of 39 slots. That could become very important depending on how you're going to set up your particular space platform. So with that out of the way, let's look at our different qualities. We have our first one, basic, and if we hover over the next one, we can see the collection area gets a little bit larger, a little bit larger, a little bit larger, and an awful lot larger. We'll put up the stats on the right hand side, but your bare basic has a collection area of 15 by 15. Going up to uncommon gives you an extra 2 tiles. Up to rare gives you another 2 tiles as well. Also epic gives you another 2 tiles, but going up to legendary is going to give you 3 tiles. So your legendary asteroid collector actually covers 50% extra space in space than what your basic asteroid collector does. So it means he has a much better opportunity to grab things from further away. Also, he has the ability with more arms to grab more things, because if we go back and look at the arm count, we have an arm count of 1, and then an arm count of 2, arm count of 3, arm count of 4, and then arm count of 6. 6 is an awful lot. 6 is going to bring some big advantages, but again, it really only matters if you can process all those resources. And the last one we're going to look at is storage. So we go from storage 39 to 44 to 49 to 54, and then finally 64. 64, again, an awful lot of storage. The other thing that I've skipped over entirely is every single time you step up in quality of asteroid collectors, they also use more power. In fact, the legendary asteroid collector does use 7.5 times as much, more than 7.5 times as much power as the common one. So this is something you need to keep in mind. The last thing I want to do is I want to do a one-to-one comparison between our basic asteroid collector and our legendary. So if we reset these two, and then no, bad asteroid collectors. Yep, let's draw a bit of a hull so they have nothing to pick on. And can I actually throw some asteroids in front of them? So you can reach out just almost to the edge. So that's where I'm going to be throwing the asteroids. And as you can see, he's being beaten by his legendary friend right beside him. So if I throw asteroids here, and I just keep throwing as fast as I can until one of them's full, they have a little light on top. We're looking for light to go yellow. As soon as it goes yellow, we know he's full. Then I'll stop clicking. A legendary asteroid collector is full. Meanwhile, the non-legendary asteroid collector only has 21 out of 39 slots full, whereas the legendary one has picked up 64. In saying that, if I throw down another asteroid, no, legendary guy is absolutely full. Okay, so with that done, can we get a simple count on exactly what they have in their inventories? So the normal Asteroid Collector has dumped all his contents on the belt. The legendary Asteroid Collector is still going. He did have 64 slots he had to empty. He's filled all the belt. Okay, we'll make the belt longer. There you go. More room on the belt. He still has room for 4, 3, 2, 1. There we go. Okay, so normal one has on the red wire, he has 23. So he had 23 in storage. He dumped all 23 out. Meanwhile, the legendary guy who has an internal buffer of 64 actually ended up having 76 in there, because each of the Asteroid Collector arms can also carry an item or two when they're out and about grabbing things, and therefore he can actually overfill his buffer by an awful lot because he has 6 arms. So this is your biggest difference between a legendary Asteroid Collector and a normal one. I actually think the Asteroid Collectors are probably the best place for you to spend your legendary parts, aiming towards to make a better ship, because they actually make a very large difference in how effective your spaceship could be depending on design. With us knowing that we can have an Asteroid Collector that we can set some filters on should we want to filter out different items, and also knowing that we can put an inserter on the back to bring the things out, as like with most things inside Factorio, we should now talk about some limits, some way to make sure that they don't pick up everything, make sure that they don't end up with a situation where we overstuff the belts and have to throw things overboard, make sure they only work when they're required to. So let's go look at the most common system you're actually going to see inside Factorio for an Asteroid Collector and a belt-fed system. The most common filtering system you're going to see inside Factorio Space Age, and that is, well, a simple belt reader linked up to the actual Asteroid Collector with an automatically set filters. So this is the most common system because it's the easiest to put together. It also has some advantages over other systems. It also comes with a couple of disadvantages. Let's talk about exactly how this works, and also talk about, well, the pros and the cons. If we just split apart the wiring a little bit so we can see what's going on, we can then talk about how it exactly works. So first off, we have a constant combinator. Constant combinator is outputting a signal. It's outputting how many asteroids I'd like to have on the belt. In this particular setup, we're going to be looking for 3 metallics, also 2 carbon, and also 5 oxide asteroids. On top of that, we have a second wire, the red wire, plugged into the belt with a read the belt contents and a hold for all belts. This puts this little wall around the outside, which means we're actually reading every single piece of the belt and trying to get a count on how many items are on the belt. The biggest advantage of a system like this is you can take, well, this whole system and wrap it around your whole ship if you want, and it's just going to count the contents of the belt. Doesn't matter how long the belt is or how short the belt is, and a lot of people have these looping all the way around their whole space platform, counting every single asteroid or every single piece of ammo that they happen to have on the belt. Now, what we're actually doing is we have 3 decider combinators. They're actually doing the decision making for us, and their job is to, well, make sure and compare how much is on the belt compared to how many we'd like. So we're comparing from the red wire, 5 is how many's on the belt, and we're looking for 5 from the green wire, being the amount we set in the constant combinator. If the 5 in the green combinator, i.e. the amount we'd like, is greater than 5 that we have on the belt, then we'll output a 1. As it's not currently, we're obviously not outputting that 1, i.e. we're not setting the filter on the machine. If I change that 5 to a... Can I move stuff out of the way so we can see this? Thank you. If I change this to a 10, we can see that instantly it sets the filter on here because I've requested more or I've used some, and therefore the filter is now enabled. The problem is I now need to wait for a tiny piece of ice to float past the front of the ship, at which point the Asteroid Collector can do its Asteroid Collecting thing and go and grab that asteroid. We have carbon right beside it. Carbon is doing the exact same. It's looking for the number in here, comparing it to the number on the belt, and saying, hey, if I don't have enough on the belt, you should enable that filter as well. The iron's doing the exact same. Biggest advantage of a system like this is if we put it all back together, it is very, very compact. On top of that, it is a system that is expandable. So if you want to grab another Asteroid Collector and dump that beside it, I want a green wire, please, and hook the green wire from one to the other. If you have set filters on, it'll then change the filters dynamically in the very next one. Can I change it to 5 then? Yep, and now we can see they both have a filter for both ice and carbon. Very convenient system, very easy to use system, but it does have a couple of disadvantages. The main thing being is I'm currently looking for both carbon and ice, and it's not showing up. So that brings us on to the next iteration, a small upgrade over the prior system. This has a couple more moving parts, or a couple less moving parts, all depends on how you look at it, and a couple more wires that we need to talk through. So we have, let's start with you. The decider combinator. This decider combinator is actually setting the filter on the inserter itself. So it's saying, hey, can I have on the belts the input signals coming from the constant combinator, which is just set to a 1 this time. So it's just outputting one asteroid, and it's saying, are those items, those ones, on the red wire, plus the items on the green wire. We don't have a green wire, so that's fine. So they're both on the red wire, so we're counting how many items are on the belt, plus an extra 1. Is that greater than... Is that less than the number we're looking for? If it is less than the number we're looking for, we're going to output that item at at a value of 1. Okay, makes sense? Didn't really think so. But what this is actually doing is it's comparing the items on the belt being... can I get a power pole? That way we can actually read that directly. Yeah, I know we can't put a power pole in space. It's fine, trust me. This power pole really needs to be in space. All right, we actually have 9, 8, and 8 on the belt because I moved everything around. If I change this to a 10, it means we're going to look for extra on the belt. So we're going to set the filter on the inserter, and then he can dump out some extra things on the belt. Okay, that's the first part of the process done. We're comparing the number of items on the belt, and if we need more items, we'll set the filter on the inserter and let them dump out. But that brings us to our second decider combinator, which is just plugged into the Asteroid Collector. The Asteroid Collector is doing 2 things. It's setting the filter and reading the contents. Can I throw in a couple of pieces of iron, please? There we go. And a couple of pieces of carbon. Done. And I want to delete... Actually, I don't want to delete. I don't want to delete anything off the belt just yet. But if I now hover over the Asteroid Collector, we can see that it now has, well, on the right-hand side, it has 13 of each type of asteroid in here. So it actually has one of every single asteroid because we're going to use that internal buffer that's in the Asteroid Collector. Now, the way it's doing that is, again, it's comparing the one value that we had before on the green wire to the one value on the red wire, being the amount that's in the Asteroid Collector. And it's again saying, hey, if that plus that, or that and that all added together, are less than or equal to 13, then we're going to output that back to itself. So it means if it doesn't have enough asteroids in there, can I dump those, and then can I grab, let's just grab out 2 pieces. Okay, so now we can see that it only has 11 in there, therefore it's going to set the signal for, hey, please grab me more iron. So when iron floats past, it can grab that early and have it sitting here. And then even if it means that I use some iron off the system, I want to change you to a 12. I don't think I fit 12 on the belt, but if we make the belt a little bit longer, I'll definitely fit 12. It means that we can still take asteroids out. We don't have to wait for them to float by, and it means we can use that internal buffer. As storage space on a space platform is very limited, having a little bit of extra storage space being used rather than being wasted on the Asteroid Collectors really does matter. Again, I'll mention it very quickly. If you're interested in these blueprints or any other ones we're about to talk about, they are all available on my Patreon page as part of my blueprint book, my blueprint pack that's covering this and a whole lot more. Next one we're going to want to talk about is a little bit of an iteration on the system. This one is a buffer overflow system. So what we're doing is we're putting in a very large value here, because our previous one we could store asteroids, that's all well and good, but it would have to be exactly 13 of each type. This one is not exactly 13 of each type. As you can see over here, I happen to have 10, 5, and 5. So I'm intentionally storing a little bit of iron, a little bit of carbon, also a little bit of ice. On top of that, it also has a filter active for prometheum. Should I go out to the edge of the universe and I want to grab some prometheum asteroid chunks? This has a couple of extra advantages, and the way it's doing that is, like I said, with a buffer overflow system. So we're putting in a very large positive number into the constant combinator, which is then going into the arithmetic combinator. It is literally just filtering from the signal. That's the words I'm looking for. So it's taking anything and it's adding 0 to it. Excellent. And then outputting that straight back out. And again, it has a set filters, read contents. So we end up with a nice little loop here where it's reading itself and also setting its own filters, which means if we have an inserter take some stuff out, As it takes things out, it's then going to re-enable more filters to go grab more stuff. The biggest advantage of this is it's very small, it's very compact. Also, you can set different limits for different asteroid collectors. You maybe want the ones on the front of the ship to grab a little bit more iron, where the ones at the rear of the ship, you might want to grab a little bit more ice. So that's the main advantage of this particular system. And then to iterate on that one more step, we have, again, another buffer overflow system. This one has a few less combinators, but also has a couple of other advantages. So we have, rather than us using a constant combinator and then the arithmetic, we just have the arithmetic here, and we're actually doing the exact same thing. The only thing, the biggest difference we have here is we have a bunch of inserters that are intentionally pulling items out, except they're set to different, well, they're set to keep one inside the asteroid collector. So these are all going to pull out everything that is above a value of 1 and put it on 3 separate belts. Sometimes it's nice to have your asteroids pre-sorted, but the problem you're going to have with the drawback you can have with this system is, again, it's designed to have the exact same amount. Oh, please stop that little inserter. We'll talk about you in just a second. I know you're trying to work hard. Yep. Can I get carbon next? It is set to do 13 of each type. So it's designed to do 13 of each type, as our previous system did. But the biggest thing is, because we're pulling things out, we're going to make sure there's always something in here. The items inside the machine are what's actually setting the filters on the machine. It's a really roundabout circuit sort of way of doing things, because we're reading the contents. We're also setting the filters according to what's in the contents. But the biggest thing we can do here is, because we have inserters being linked in that are pulling everything out, but also keeping some in stock, it means we could have this, probably the main place I'd use this, and the main place I have used this, is the front of a ship. Front of a ship where, when I'm in motion, I'm collecting a whole lot of extra asteroids, but one of the things I'm trying to collect a whole lot of is I'm definitely trying to collect a whole lot of iron, not the other items. So this is one that I've actually used, as I've said, to not have the limit to 13 of each type, but have the limit of 20 of each type. You might notice that 20 of each type is more than the total storage of 39. And then I actually had a couple of dump inserters that were just taking out any excess. So because I'm going to keep one in the system, one inside the collector at all times, they were outputting out the rear. And then anytime I accelerated the ship, we'd end up getting an extra iron. The extra iron would go off into ammo production. Otherwise, I'd have the one on the side that took out anything above 8. So when it's sitting around idle doing a whole lot of nothing, it made sure there were extra space in there for extra carbon, extra ice that I could use to refill the engines. But once the engines were full, and then we started moving forward, I really wanted to grab more iron, hence it was weighted to have more of all items in stock. But more importantly, it would be able to grab all the iron it could, shove it out the back on the belt, and off to ammo making. And meanwhile, this little guy on the side is just taking any excess that might be in there out. As you can see, because he is incredibly slow compared to one of these guys at the back. Can I go back to throwing asteroids at this thing? The guy on the side never has a chance to pull anything out, because it never gets to a stage if there's more than 8 in stock. If it does get to a stage where there's more than 8 in stock, I've never... it finally happened. Yep. It took an awful lot to overflow this guy and make sure I had too much in there for it to then dump out sideways. Meanwhile, all the iron's going off to ammo production, and he just became the primary ammo producer from a single asteroid collector. Also managed to stock me up a decent amount of ice and carbon in the meantime. Anyway, from there, we're going to go to the next iteration. The next evolution of asteroid collection. And again, this one's a little bit different, but this is designed to work with the next video. The next video, we're going to talk about asteroid crushing, which we're not covering in this video. We're not talking about asteroid processing apart from this one system, because this is going to tie things together. So again, we have an asteroid collector that is using its internal buffer of 39 items. It's somehow got too many in there. I'm not going to question it. And this is, any of them are less than or equal to 13. We're going to output a 1. So we're going to make sure we have 13 of each in stock. We're outputting onto 3 separate belts. These don't have any sort of counters. They'll fully empty the storage if needs be. But we're actually getting the input signal from our different crushers. So the different crushers are outputting what their ingredients are on the red wire, which is then setting the filter on here, and at the same time making sure that these guys are full. The biggest advantage of a system like this is it means in the future, when we're going to talk about crushers and that sort of stuff, you can actually set the recipes on these machines, and therefore you can dynamically control the recipes of these machines and have a situation where, as you're using more of a certain type of asteroid for ammo creation, fuel creation, whatever it happens to be, the asteroid collectors are setting their filters to look for more of that asteroid type at the front of the ship, whilst you're using the asteroids at the rear of the ship. It also means that you can potentially set the storage a little bit higher than 13 of each type. This is why I have a little bit over 13 of each type, because I was dynamically changing the recipes. But again, Asteroid Collectors, going to do a quick stop here because these are doing an extra step. Normally when you're processing an asteroid, you have that 20% chance to get the asteroid back out. If they come out, the only place they can come out, because we have filters on the inserter, is here. If they come out here, we have this inserter which is reading the contents of the belt, and it says if everything equals 0, then you're allowed to run. If everything doesn't equal 0, i.e. I have an asteroid on this belt, this inserter gets turned off, which means that the very next asteroid you're going to be processing, you're probably not fast enough. The very next asteroid you're going to process, get out of my way, is this one sitting here on this belt. So that has to be processed, that has to be fed into the machine before this guy can turn back on. Technically, they both get input at the same time, but the point is, we're in a situation where any bonus asteroids you get back out are fed back into the system. And again, if I just grab a green wire, and hook you into you are set to one of the advanced recipes, being the asteroid reprocessing. If I set you to on, and I set you to set recipe, and we go you, and I might need a faster inserter. Oh, there we go. We have 2 of them for that, which means because I have a whole lot of asteroid crushing going on, we can see that for some reason you have iron stuck in the system. I don't know where the iron symbol's coming from. I've crossed the wire somewhere, but because we're doing carbon reprocessing, because we're doing this over and over, it does mean that we can dynamically, as I said, change the recipes on the asteroid collector. Sure, not the best way to do the asteroid reprocessing this side, requires a couple of extra layers of smarts. Again, we're going to be talking about that in the next video, where we're covering things like dynamic crashes and re-rollers in a dedicated video very soon. Then that leads me to my very last few items. But that, like I asked whether I could borrow at the start of the video, is there any chance I can keep it now? Also, maybe you should consider hitting subscribe if you haven't already, to make sure you get notified of that crashing video coming up in the not too distant future. Anyway, last things I want to talk about is, well, my standardized design. Also, I want to talk about different spots in the systems and where you're going to be getting asteroids from and what their sort of density is. So in the Factorio, you can see the exact density of asteroids at different ranges, from Narvis to Vulcanus, or from Narvis to Gleba, or from Narvis to Forgola, also Vulcanus, Gleba, so on and so forth. And I can honestly tell you, after looking through these for quite some time, that generally, if we check out the Factorio, we can see the different graphs for the different space routes we can take. And the long and the short of it is, if we actually go out to the space map, I can tell you that the density for the different planets, Narvis to Vulcanus, is going to get you the highest amount of metal. If you want to make a metal run, if you want to have a whole lot of metal on the ship to make a whole lot of ammo, this is probably the route you want to take. If you want to go and get a good mix of both metal and carbon, you want to travel from Vulcanus to Gleba. If you're traveling from Gleba to Forgola, it's still mostly metal and carbon, but it's actually the worst trip for ice, which is not what I expected. And then finally, Gleba to Aquilo is the best option for carbon, whereas Forgola to Aquilo is the better option for iron. Both of them actually terrible for ice. But once you get past Aquilo, everything is pretty much ice anyway. And lastly, for storage of asteroids and also placement of asteroid collectors, I want to show you my 4 standardized designs. These are the ones I use on the side of the ship, the rear of the ship, Not so much at the front. Front's a little bit different, but that's a whole different story for a whole nother time when we cover weapons and ammunition and all that sort of stuff in an upcoming video. So my standardized design is one of these. Why? Because I have an Asteroid Collector, and if I actually hold one of these in my hand, we can see that it has a one tile overlap with its neighbor. I can fit in a couple of solar panels, and I have a dedicated belt for asteroids, also a dedicated belt for ammo. You may ask why I'm using a dedicated belt for each. Should I not have them share a belt? And the answer is asteroid storage. I prefer to having a couple of bits of extra asteroid hanging around for those times when I need them, and also means that if I throw down a splitter right here, we can then put a little side load on there and have double the belt capacity because I'm now loading both sides of the belt. My second iteration is where I go a little bit more heavy on the storage by doubling up the amount of belts. As we can see, I have 18 belts here, whereas on our first example, I have 9, and that's because I put in a wonderful squiggle. The wonderful squiggle has pushed the solar panels forward a tile, but that's fine by me. It just means that I have a little bit more storage for asteroids, because as you progress through the game, having more asteroids hanging around, especially if you're sorting them out a little bit later down the line, it definitely helps a lot. And then my next design, my next iteration, all depends on what your ship is actually doing, is just putting some solar panels through the actual belts. So it means I have a little bit less storage than I did previously, but also at the same time, I have a little bit more power. If you're heading out to Fulgorup or Aquila, having a little bit of extra solar power might make all the difference. And then finally, I have my last design where I've pushed everything forward just a little bit so I can put in an accumulator here instead. Again, it all depends on where you're going, where you're off to, and how your power is situated on your particular ship. I have a couple of ships that have very large bursts of power as different processes kick in, whether it be asteroid re-rolling or ammo production, or maybe production on the actual ship. But again, we're going to be covering those in upcoming videos where we talk about other modules you may want to include on your ship. But with all that said and done, this is where I'm going to leave Asteroid Collectors. We've covered everything from the basics to the more advanced stuff, to a little bit of intermediate stuff in the middle. There's probably a whole lot more for me to cover, but I'll look at doing that in an upcoming video. With all that said and done, I'm going to be leaving this video right here. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Do hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you in the very next video. All right, bye.